housing crisis is wreaking havoc nationally. Our podcast discusses how it is playing out specifically in Black Berkeley, California, chronicling the lived experiences behind what people call gentrification, detailing our endeavor for our right to stay and our right to return. Brought to you by Healthy Black Families. I am your host, Deb, and this is Telling Our Stories, the Housing Chronicles. Welcome. We are back with Randolph Bell of Creative Development Partners, an organization hired by the City of Berkeley to facilitate communication between the city, a soon-to-be-chosen developer, local community organizations, and Bay Area Rapid Transit, known locally as BART. So, let me see if I'm understanding this. BART contracts out to a developer.
There's a bidding process to select a developer, and developers have to have access to sufficient monies to complete the project.
And completing the project means actually building the thing. It's building the structure, correct?
Correct. Right.
Okay.
So if it's we're just going to make up numbers here. Numbers are greater, but if it's $100 million, they have to be able to raise, right? It's not the developer's money typically, right? There are some developers that self-fund projects for a particular return on investment, but otherwise they're raising money to invest in the project, and then they basically distribute returns. Whatever money comes in is going to require a return on investment. What Equitable Black Berkeley is saying is that we want to be in that investment pool such that there's a return on investment, such that we can then pay for the programs that support harm repair.
Right. That's why it's important for the stakeholders to have a significant financial positioning, as you framed it.
Correct. If we was to do the everybody put 5 on it thing, yeah, we would have, maybe enough to buy a burger if we hold the cheese. You know what I mean? That is not, we're not looking for community investment. We're looking at participating in the capital stack, as they call it, how all of the monies to complete the project. There's typically a pre-development, phase of this when they're in all the soft costs, architecture, engineering, and any other expenses before they break ground. And then there are these other costs that come in after they break ground and into construction and into completion, right? And so when you look at that, there are different places for money to be injected into that process. And we would really like to kind of, we're sorting out how the community can, and I'm saying community, right? Just because that's, like the simplest way. I typically like to use communities because there are so many different communities that call themselves stakeholders, and all of them wanted something different. You know what I mean? But for simplicity, we're just going to say, we really want the community to have a significant stake in this, such that there is a return on investment that, is not in the hundreds or thousands of dollars. It needs to be in the millions of dollars on an ongoing basis in order to sustain the programs that are going to impact the harm.
Is there a timeline for funding benchmarks?
There is, because some things are happening right now, right? And this thing is moving at the pace of business. It's business in the context of government, which is not as fast, but there is a timeline. So The developer has not been selected yet, but once the developer is selected, they move into a period that's called an exclusive negotiating agreement period, or ENA. And that's when, a lot of the deal really comes into form. And then that's when the timeline of what money comes in when, that's when all that is done. And again, what we are saying is that we want the community investment to come in early. We want to bake ourselves into the project early. And in some regards, what we're trying to do is to displace market-based money. And that's a whole nother conversation about where money comes from for development projects. Some of the sources of where money comes from in development projects, it could come from hedge funds, it could come from private equity, it could come from retirement funds, it could come from overseas. But in a lot of those instances, kind of money just needs money. It just needs a return on investment. And many times there isn't really a scenario where the returns on that money can come back to this community. So that's why we have to be in there. The returns are not coming back to Berkeley, right? And it's certainly not coming back to this harm repair framework that we're creating. And so, one, that's why we have to be, in the mix. And two, we would, really like to ensure that monies are not coming from any other extractive source, right? Which is, there's a whole kind of framework called ESG, or environment, social, and governance, right? In terms of investments and how companies do business. And so we want to really focus on the social piece of that, because that's where our social return on investment comes in. Not only a financial return, but also a social return on investment. That's where that comes from.
Right, because you have big businesses that come into neighborhoods, which then causes displacement. But the people that can live there are from those businesses because they get paid a certain amount. And then they call that gentrification. So then those businesses have monies they could dole out. Right? Am I hearing this correctly?
So that's kind of a separate thing, just in terms of big businesses coming in. And that's typically in a corporate setting where if you look at, any of the big tech firms, those employees get paid more, and then they cause a burden on, the housing. There's a downward pressure on the housing, right? And there's a lot of displacement there. That is certainly a thing. Kind of the same thing happens with students in Berkeley, right? Like the university, right. There's a downward pressure on housing. But what we're talking about is literally where the money is coming from. If there's an overseas investment, this is like probably the easiest way to look at it. If there's an overseas investment that comes into the project to get it done, the profits from that are going back overseas, right? That's kind of the simplest way to look at it. They typically want a return on investment, but the fact is that money is going out. If there was a local investment to be made or a community investment to be made, those returns would come straight back to the community or to that local entity, which is, even if it wasn't in the name of the community, that money is staying locally and it's going to circulate local, right? That's what we're trying to go for. That's what we're trying to ensure here.
It's like a feedback loop.
It is, right? And it's kind of like, like a lot of what, like the principles of cooperative economics, which is one of the principles of Kwanzaa, right? It's spending money amongst ourselves. So we're circulating that money and it stays in the community, right? There are studies that show that Black people in the Black community, their money does not circulate within the community, right? It may go around one time before it leaves the community, whereas some other communities, they're spending money with a business who is then spending money on another business in the community, which is spending, for whatever they need. That money is staying right there. And then that's how communities, thrive, right? As opposed to that money, going out of the community and you can't use it to build up, strong neighborhoods.
Yeah, what needs building up.
Yeah.
So at the October 15th People's Assembly, which was held by Healthy Black Families, you reference community benefit by design as creative development partners strategy, and you spoke about it a little bit earlier. Can you explain what that is? Is this part of what we're talking about earlier?
So that is an approach that we came up with, kind of a mantra for us, just because we all came from community development and nonprofit development. And so the only goal was to serve lower income, people and largely communities of color. That was the whole goal. But that whole industry, that whole sector of, nonprofit development sector, they operate within a very, kind of particular structure, financing structure, typically, based on tax credits and philanthropy and that sort of thing. On the other side, you've got for-profit developers, and we're just going to use the most extreme situation. I know that there are for-profit developers that would consider themselves nice guys and gals and responsive to the community. We know that. But typically, and again, based on where that money comes from, right, that money needs to beget money, right? It does not need to beget community goodwill, right? So what we're trying to do is operate in the middle. We're trying to use market-based frameworks to address community-based challenges. In another context, people will call it something like a social enterprise or a B Corp, something that benefit corp, which is a tax status or structure, where it's a for-profit business that within its bylaws is set up to serve some community good, right? So we're not set up as a B Corp or a social enterprise. We're just trying to find the most ingenious or innovative market-based structures to address some of these challenges, right? Will we make $1 zillion doing this? Probably not, right? But will we do just fine? Yes, we will. And so it's just not motivated by money. We're trying to, and what we say is bake in all the community benefits. What does community need, right? We know what they need, right? Plus we're going to ask, but we need housing, we need economic opportunity, we need education, we need health, we need safety, and we need a thriving cultural community, right? So how do we bake all that in first and then build a business model around it? In this instance, Ashby Flea Market is coming back, right? That's going to be baked in. How do we support that? And how do we support the Ashby Flea Market in a way that not only sustains them, but allows those vendors to thrive, right? Mm-hmm. So there could be a situation where we move, we structure this such that a vendor can move from, this once a week market to a semi-permanent situation, and they may move up to a storefront or something, right? We have to move them through a trajectory. That's, one thought just around culture. And we know what happens at the market, right? I started one of my businesses at the market, airbrushing t-shirts, and it was live. There was food, there was music, the drums is kicking, you know what I mean? That's where people came, right? Yep. To express themselves, to trade, to, experience the culture. And so we want to figure out how to take that unique asset that is, kind of particular to Berkeley and make sure that it, is sustained. So not only that it thrives, but not only that it is sustained, but it also thrives. So that's what we're baking. That's what we're trying to bake into this project.
So what are difficulties that have arisen so far?
Wow. So the difficulties are just really based on people's understanding and willingness to understand what it is that we're trying to do and what we're trying to do it. So there's always a resistance to newness and to change, right? So that's always going to be a difficulty. So again, the prospect of devising a solution that rises to the magnitude of the problem, right? And the challenges that Black people continue to face and have historically faced, coming up with that solution is not going to be easy. So, kind of bringing people along can be difficult. I would also say that because planners and developers really thrive in situations where there are 100% certainty in what we're doing moving forward, that's a challenge because there is not 100% certainty in what we're doing. And it's new, but it doesn't not make sense, right? That's how we've tried to frame this. It is all very reasonable to think that we can pull this off.
Absolutely.
The other challenge is that development has typically been driven by the developers, right? One side says, hey, we want this. And the developer may say, nope, can't give you that, right? That doesn't work. Doesn't pencil out. And not going to do that. So then the other side says, okay, what can you do? It's like, well, we can do this. This is based on what they are comfortable with doing, not necessarily all of what the community or the sponsoring entity wants, right? So we're in a position to take what we get as opposed to getting what we want, right? We're trying to get what we want, right? That's what we're trying to do in this process. And that is going to be, kind of a difficult situation, because we're asking.
It's negotiating for what we think we deserve, right?
Oh, and absolutely.
So nudging people from their comfort zones.
Absolutely. And and the community is typically not organized or equipped to negotiate either with the city, with the agency, or with the developer. That's another thing that we're trying to fix.
That's the work.
We're asking that BART, the city, the developers employ a new approach where we're leveraging these multiple new strategies, that they've never done before, and start with the community influencing process to get the project that's responsive, as responsive and as beneficial to the community. And when we say community, we do mean the least among us, right? That includes the least among us. So that's kind of what we're asking, that we leverage, what we know that we can do in new ways.
So drawing from your experience with some of these other projects you've advised, do you foresee any more difficulties?
Yep.
Than just the ones you listed? Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
Can you tell us what some of those might be?
Yeah. No, that's an easy one. This is not an easy process, and we know if you've been doing anything long enough, you know that nothing worth having is easy or without persistent challenges. The ones that you know, the ones that you know, and the ones that you don't know. So right now we've got really challenges on all fronts. Both the ones that we can expect and the ones that we don't know. It is fortunate that the mayor and the mayor's office and the city are behind this, right? They are, inextricably tied to this, effort to provide community benefits. So that's great. That's great. Another significant challenge will be just the process of educating and organizing the community. That's not an easy process. It will be incredible, once we do. So that will be a significant challenge, because we really want to build up the folks, the residents and leaders that are invariably going to, kind of drive this process. You may get 100 people out to a meeting, but it's going to be, 2 or 3 that are there every single time. You know what I mean? And so we want to build up, resident leaders such they can, and we're talking about the spheres of influence, those folks in the community that can bring the community along. And then we want to bring the understanding of the process, the educational process for all of the community up, so that when we are engaging with the city, with BART, with the developers, that we're, we're kind of level setting people's understanding of the process, so nobody feels like they're kind of taken advantage of. So that part, the technical assistance and community development piece, will be significant. But that's what, the work of Healthy Black Families, creative development partners. So that's what our work entails, is positioning the communities to have a seat at the table.
Right. I feel like the city should also have a big part in helping in whatever ways they could help Healthy Black Family and creative development partners in making sure we secure our folks in that way.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah. And they've actually been fantastic. The mayor and his staff have been, specifically his chief of staff, Jacqueline McCormick, have been fantastic. They've been assisting with ensuring that we, creative development partners, are able to stay in the process, but also kind of facilitating when facilitation is needed, and also stepping back and allowing the community to step forward when that is possible. So, and then we're also kind of in the process of, putting together some of the pieces And there's a lot happening on the city side that like we don't know about, but we do really appreciate their efforts in this process.
Yeah. And so what would be helpful to creative development partners in accomplishing its role?
So probably a couple of things. We really need a breakthrough in understanding of the opportunity. Just everything that is possible with this process, with this development, with this project, what is possible, right? It is possible to do well by doing good or doing good by doing well. So there's a way for a win-win-win-win for all the stakeholders. And we just need, a breakthrough in understanding on how that can happen. We need a breakthrough in understanding that this is a model for future community development. And this is really the threshold for communities to operate in more equitable fashion.
And by threshold, you mean?
As we are successful in this process, we don't think that there will be any other reason to do anything differently moving forward. We're really trying to set a new paradigm.
Groundbreaking. Yeah, that would be so great. So what are the ways an innovative community project like this one, Equitable Black Berkeley, what are the ways it can be sustainable, both in governance and in funding?
So first, I would think that there needs to be a sustained community-informed decision-making process that includes community education and binding multi-stakeholder agreements. That's one way. And we frame community influence as opposed to community engagement, because the community doesn't just want to be engaged, right? Talked at, informed, when something is happening or after the fact. They really want an opportunity to influence the process. That is another way to make this sustainable if we are able to deploy a much more robust community influencing process. And then the last one is leadership, on all fronts. So not only at the city and at BART, but also in those resident leaders that kind of hold accountable, the folks that are in positions of power.
So what are the ways of structuring this Equitable Black Berkeley in ways that ensure it's responsive to the needs and desires of Black people who lived in once or currently might be and are attempting to hold on to it? Berkeley, who live in Berkeley, as an integral part of this planning?
Yeah. So healthy Black families is really at the center of this as the anchor organization. And the goal is to center the work that they're doing, to couch the work that they're doing really as the focal point for the voice of the community. And so I think from that process, we will certainly, the Black voice will be there. We'll also be working directly with the communities to direct, kind of what measures of harm repair that are being pursued. And so I think if we, are really diligent about that, then I think we will certainly have the voice of those Black communities and historic Black communities of South Berkeley represented.
We're going to have to build those structures, right? Do you know if or foresee there being a way for Equitable Black Berkeley to prioritize Black residents that have gotten pushed out of Berkeley in returning back to their community?
We do. Much of it is, based on the same thing, putting healthy Black families at the center. But part of it goes back to the issue of everyone involved understanding why we're doing this work, and supporting, Black people. The fact that supporting Black people supports the broader community. Again, that goes back to the understanding. And the greater understanding that many facets and contexts of the decades of harm that have been enacted on these communities, it's really going to take a factor more of time to get back, right? So people have to understand that, like, okay, it took us, decades and generations to get here. We're not going to come up with a solution and have this thing fixed in 5 years, or when this project is built, right? 10 years, whatever. It's going to take many, many more years, which is why we have to build in the sustainability components of this project such that we can, kind of fund in perpetuity these harm repair measures until they are no longer necessary. But that's not in our generation. So we really need that to be understood clearly.
Yeah, and that's a huge part of the work,
Absolutely.
right? Huge part of the work. I mean, both as you're sitting at the tables with BART, the city. Yeah, it's a huge part of the work.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Randolph Bell of Creative Development Partners. It's been a pleasure, and it feels like we're just barely cracking the shell, and we're still needing to look at a lot of this. So I'm sure we'll have you back on again to explain other parts or go deeper into some of them. Thank you so much.
Oh, this has been great. We look forward to talking more.
Written, edited, and hosted by Deborah Hailu, Telling Our Stories program coordinator at Healthy Black Families, Inc. Audio engineered by Adrian Davis and Salim Naji Ullah of One Hitter Entertainment. Shout out to James Shields of Creative Shields for our beautiful podcast artwork. Akila Shahid, Office and Media Manager at Healthy Black Families, Inc. for the many ways she steps up and bridges our gaps. And Wilhelmina Wilson, Executive Director at Healthy Black Families, Inc. for bringing all of this together. Casting out the net of Black love in service of all humanity, this has been Telling Our Stories, the Housing Chronicles. See you next time.